the proof that we have a spiritual problem in Washington, in our government, in politics, is that we have this lack of empathy, whether it is empathy for the people who are losing their jobs or the businesses that are just like overnight having to close, or empathy for the people who are, this is working for them, or there's just a lack of empathy. And that is ultimately going to be our downfall.
Welcome to We Have a Spiritual Problem, a podcast exploring the deep interconnections between personal wellness, societal challenges, and spiritual growth. In this episode, I am joined by Lauryn Axelrod, author of 10 Words, an Interspiritual Guide to Becoming Better People in a Better World, to explore the spiritual crisis in today's social, political environment, the importance of acceptance and gratitude in navigating life's challenges. We discuss the duality of existence, the concept of crisis as an opportunity for growth, and the necessity of empathy in our divided society. We explore the themes of authenticity, spirituality, and the power of choice in defining our future. Our world calls out for benevolence and gratitude, and advocating for a collective approach to creating a better world. We are living in a world where fuck and wow encapsulate the human experience. Lauryn, welcome back to We Have a Spiritual Problem, and you have been such an instrumental voice in inspiring this podcast, and you were the first guest on the podcast. So it's great to have you back. First of all, what have you been up to since the last time we've had you on the podcast? Anything exciting to report to the listeners and the viewers?
Mm. Well, first of all, it is always an honor and a pleasure to have conversation with you, Jeff. We just go and we just go, and it's fantastic. Thank you. Um, I've been working on another book, which is a compilation. It's Radical Spirituality from A to Z. So it's taking some specific words and exploring them from a radical spirituality perspective. These are words that are common across all spiritual practices and traditions. So I've been working on that. And that I love writing. I love exploring. I love um trying to understand what it is that spirituality entails. And then of course trying to keep up with what's going on in the world. And not letting it send me into a place of despair or fear, because those aren't helpful.
In words, that's kind of been the theme of our conversations. The first couple episodes, or the episode of the Aging Well podcast, and the first episode of this podcast, we talked about your book, 10 Words, and we really addressed those. And in the latter part of the first We Have a Spiritual Problem episode, you told a story that presented two really keywords, and that's kind of going to be the theme today.
Mm.
And so I'm kind of excited to just kind of dive into those. But the words, the 10 words keep coming up repeatedly between really both podcasts and even just in my conversations in general with people. It's just as we go from attention to that fulcrum point of contemplation to ultimately care. And I think, as you mentioned, that's where our country is right now. I think we're maybe a bit more at the attention stage right now. And,
Mhm.
then we have to just kind of move through the process, and
Right.
we have to quickly get to that contemplation stage so that we can begin to, you know, be creative and be cooperative and
Mm.
hopefully celebrate and then have care for one another. And then we get into this renewed state of being where now we're going to have a different attention to the problems of the world. So I
Mm.
think I'm going to plug your book, the 10 words, make sure that, people are pulling out that book and reading it as they're struggling through what we're going through right now in this country. And perhaps our Canadian friends, our Mexican friends, our Chinese friends, our European friends could all read the book as well. And we can all kind of come to a common place of understanding and, as you said, empathy.
Mm.
And but tell the story again of the two words that are leading into today's episode.
So, several years ago, I had a dear friend who sadly had a stroke. And immediately after her stroke, she went into this period of aphasia where she couldn't really speak. She had a few words. The few words were two, and it was fuck and wow. Those were the only two words she could say. So she spent hours just looking around with this face full of amazement and wonder and confusion and joy, and all she could say is wow, fuck, wow, and people were freaking out, and I thought it was brilliant. I thought, what else do you really need to say? What are the real emotions, the real spiritual feelings that we wrestle with, that come up all the time? And one is like, oh my God, what is going on? Like, I would say that's a place we are right now for a lot of people. We're in the fuck phase, right?
Hmm.
But then you see something really wonderful and mysterious and beautiful, and then you're in the wow. Wow, look at the what world we do get to live in. Yeah, okay, there's that stuff, but there's also this, you know? And for me, that wow factor, that's where I try to stay as much as possible. It's not easy, it's really not, especially not right now where we're just being bombarded with stuff that's really challenging our sense of norms, our spiritual sense, our ethical sense, um our fears, our personal fears for safety or for, our jobs, our families. So it's not easy to be in that wow place, but it's that wow place that uh sort of connects us to whatever you wanna call the sacred, right?
That is great. Now, yeah, even we're just going to keep saying fuck because we can bleep that out. So anybody listening to this, you're going to be hearing a lot of bleeps today. It's just a lot easier than just saying the F word.
Right.
But I went to high school with a guy. He was a year or two older than me, and we always used to joke that this guy could form sentences only using the word fuck. And you could use it as a noun, a verb, an adjective, and that's where that word is just so impactful from your story that we can from a shock or negative standpoint say, or
Right.
we can be like, fuck, it's that word that spans from the disappointment to the uh what's the word, disconcertation, is that the word, or discomfort, let's use that word,
Yeah.
to total enthusiasm and excitement.
Right.
I
And
remember.
wow does the same thing,
Yeah.
right? Wow does the same thing. And what I love about this, the interplay between these two words is that, this is life.
Mhm.
This is life. It's not all hunky dory all the time. It's not all wow, you know? And it's also not all, but we have both. And without the, side, we wouldn't have the side. It's necessary. The third patriarch of Chan Zen Buddhism, Sengsan, said that as soon as you separate what you like from what you don't like, you set heaven and earth infinitely apart, right? That making of a distinction, and that you cannot have good without having bad. You must have, they push against each other. Because think about it, if you lived in a world where it was all good all the time, you wouldn't even know it was all good because you'd have nothing to compare it to. So we live in this world where, wow, like are in a constant interplay with each other.
Maybe generations from now, fucking wow will be the yin and yang.
Well, they kinda are,
Yeah.
They kinda are. They're just more of our response to what we're being given, of what shows up, of what's happening. It's in our responses that we can respond in the negative. We don't like this, we don't want it, or we can respond in the, "Oh, I like that. I like this." The Buddhist idea of we either go towards the things that we like, attraction, or we pull ourselves away from the things we don't like, aversion. And those two are always in interplay. This is the reality as we live in a dualistic world. In the absolute, sure, it's all one. But here, like the first thing that God did in the Bible, right, in Genesis, is he created duality. He separated the dark from the light. First thing. So here we are. We live in a world where it's fuck and it's wow, you know?
Yeah. And I think too, as you were going through a lot of that, and then we're talking about the different uses of the word so we can't have birth without
Good point.
I mean, we might not want to use that language, but
Right,
it makes a point,
right,
and
right.
ever since you told me that story, I just been wow, It's like,
Exactly. I mean, maybe we could add one more thing, which would be thank you,
yeah. I think you
you
mentioned that
know?
the first time too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
That-
I mean, we go back and forth between fucking wow all the time, and we don't always get to the thank you part. Like, thank you for fucking wow.
yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to respond in these different ways, to have things that pull us both ways. That's the richness of life.
Yeah, that's my effort to change the spelling of gratitude to having two T's. So it's an attitude of gratitude.
Mm, yeah.
If we have an attitude of gratitude in those times of fun, then good things come from it. If we have it in the times of wow, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be grateful for those moments in our lives that are fuck and the moments in our lives that are the wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is going to be a fun conversation because just keep saying the word.
Well, it's just going to be a whole podcast of beep, 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 beep.
Yeah,
Yeah. Maybe we don't have to, I don't know. It's up to you. But yeah, it is. We have to have gratitude for whatever life throws at us, even if we don't like it.
right.
It's we don't have to who said we had to like everything? That's kind of this weird like contemporary idea that, it's why we have to like go 10% happier and, like everybody's focus is I have to be happy all the time. I have to like everything all the time or there's something wrong. It's like no, not everything, we can say I don't really like this. I don't really like this, but we do have to accept it. That's, second word in the 10 words, right? Where
Right.
we're in attention right now. We're also in acceptance. Really hardcore right now,
Yeah. People
you
are
know,
really, really struggling with that acceptance piece.
really struggling. And that's part of the fuck wow.
Yeah.
Is that accepting, okay, this sucks. And
Right.
that's it. And you stop there. It's when you keep going with, it sucks and it's terrible and blah, 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 blah. And down you go into this space of despair instead of going, you know what, this is hard. This is challenging.
Right. And I think, that effort to always be in a spot of happiness is why our society is so heavily medicated these days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Good.
Exactly, that we can't tolerate the slightest little bit of discomfort. Like, who the heck said that you were never going to experience discomfort in life? Again, I'm gonna go back to the biblical reference. So, after God creates duality, right? Then he puts Adam and Eve in the garden where everything's like, "Oh, it's all good. All you have to do is choose between cake and pie." Right? Don't touch that tree. Because that tree is going to teach you that there is duality. There's fucking there's wow,
Yeah.
right? So they touch the tree and he kicks them out. And he says, "Sorry, told you. Now you are going to experience pain and suffering. You're going to have pain in childbirth. You're going to have, you're going to have to go toil the land. Sorry." Like you don't get all wow. You get the
Mhm.
fuck part too.
That kind of presents a question. Do you think, and I know some people will kind of shut off as soon as we start talking God, but just from a more philosophical perspective, do you think God intended, well, I shouldn't say intended, but expected Adam and Eve to eat of the tree of the fruit of the tree?
Yeah, well, now we're getting into deep theology, like,
Yeah.
but uh Well, yeah, because otherwise it's kind of like when you've got kids and you've just baked cookies and you put them aside and you say, "Don't touch those cookies." You wouldn't say, "Don't touch those cookies," if you didn't expect that they were gonna touch the cookies, right? You
Right.
wouldn't have to tell them not to.
And we expect they will.
Right. So, I mean, we could look at it that way, like, why would God have said, "Don't touch that tree," if he didn't know that that they're gonna wanna touch the tree?
Right. And it just makes me wonder, would man have continued down his path of evolution, which I personally believe, we've had this period of more physical evolution, which, you think is really representative of the humankind's time up till Adam and Eve. And then that opened up this opportunity for spiritual evolution
Mhm.
where the friction in life and that duality is forcing us to grow and to become deeper, more intellectual, emotional, and more socially connected individuals
Mhm.
to where, we have come to a point of great friction right now and that's why I'm a bit more optimistic than a lot of people in this point in time, because I feel like this is a key moment in man's history that we are going to have a leap of evolution, spiritually in this period of time.
Well, I agree with you because I actually feel, again, going back to Sengsan, going back to the idea that you can't have good if you don't have bad. So we have to have something that pushes us, right? And if we don't have bad, we can't choose good, right? We can't choose if we don't have something that's forcing us to make choices, to grow. This is how we grow, right? We
Right.
go, okay, don't really like this. So how am I going to respond? What am I going to do? We have to make choices. And those choices are what forces evolution. I mean, even from a biological perspective or Newtonian physics, you have to have something pushing on you. You have to have a stressor in order to evolve. So I'm like you. I actually have optimism about this and on that level that I feel like if we can take, in Chinese, the word for crisis and opportunity are the same. It's the same word. So if we can take this crisis and turn it into the opportunity that it really is for us to really define what matters to us and how we are going to respond from a spiritual place, from that place of values, what matters, what really matters. Going back to that idea, if we say that compassion is one of our values, well, this is an opportunity where we're going to be pushed against, right? In order to prove that, prove it,
Yeah.
walk your talk. And that's what this time is doing for us. So yeah, I'm hopeful that will, we will grow through it. We will evolve into, more spiritually oriented, more compassionate, more understanding human beings. But
I
we'll
mean,
see.
I think that's our only option. I mean, what else other than our imminent destruction can come out of that kind of friction? We either have to come together or we destroy ourselves.
Right. I mean, and both of those are on the table. I mean, they are. They're both on the table.
Right.
And they're always on the table.
Hmm.
They are always. There's never, sometimes it feels more urgent or immediate, like right now,
Hmm.
and other times it doesn't. But they're all those two choices are always on the table.
It's always that duality. It's always fucking wow.
It's always that, It's just
Right.
there's no way around it. That's the world we live in, and that's the world we will always live in. And so our spirituality has to take that into account. And that's what all spirituality is ultimately trying to tell us is like, here are your choices. Which will you choose?
And hence we come to a podcast called We Have a Spiritual Problem.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, all of these things, even what we're seeing, like the fact that we have choices is a spiritual problem.
Hmm.
Like that
Right.
is the spiritual problem. Again, whether we're talking, even the origins, the origin stories in Taoism, there was the one who created the two. So the Tao is the one, God, Tao, same idea, right? Who the first thing that the Tao or the one does is create the two, the yin and the yang, dark and light, and wow.
Right.
You know? That's it. That's the world we live in and always has been. It's at the heart of spirituality is which will you choose?
And you study religion, so is it pretty consistent really across all religious practices that we have kind of that duality?
Yes and no, right? So some traditions go with sort of well, let me backtrack. At the heart even of the traditions that don't seem non-dual, right? Like the Abrahamics, there's God, there's us, right? There's duality.
Hmm.
If even if you dig into them, there is the non-dual. There's the not two, right? God is one.
Right.
There you go. So in the absolute, that is true across the board, that there is non-duality. In the relative, it's also true that there's duality across the board, right? Because we always have to make these choices. So even, Buddhism, you know, suffering is inevitable, shit's going to happen. It's how you deal with that. So there's always, we live in a dualistic universe. A lot of our practices are designed to help us. This is kind of, what enlightenment is is to help us see that in our heads, right?
Hmm.
That's there. I mean, that really there is no difference.
Yeah, I was thinking as you said, God is one, and yet there's that separation,
Hmm.
but it's all working to bring us back together. So it's that tension that tries to pull us apart and separate us.
Hmm.
But in the end, what it's ultimately doing is bringing us back to that one, to where it brings us in wholeness with God.
Right. And that is true across the board, right? That is the purpose or one of the purposes of, religion or spirituality is to bring you back to the one, bring you into unity, into a relationship with the one, with one.
Because I
Through
can't,
two. Like you gotta go
yeah,
through the fuck wow.
right. Back to the fucking wow. We're going to keep
Right.
going back to that.
You gotta go through it, in order to be able to recognize that, oh no, we actually need the two of them and they're not opposite. They're, not two, which is, a Taoist or Buddhist way of saying it, or Vedantic Hindu. The non-dual traditions will say not two. They don't say one, they say not two. Abrahamic traditions say one. Same idea.
Yeah. And the Christian tradition kind of goes to the three, but, you
Right, but
know,
the 3 are 1,
right,
it's just 3 parts. They're not separate entirely, the same way day and night are not separate.
right.
They're just 2 points along a spectrum.
And they're all ultimately connected.
Oh, we just went down a deep theological place,
Yeah.
but yeah, but, let's take that back to an understanding, like, how we navigate this particularly challenging time. Um, if we can not go into the hard duality, right, but understand kind of like that, the many ways that one can say "fucking wow," right? That it's really a lot more fluid than that. That it's not hard duality, but it is, um, it's in the maybe. It's in the motion between the 2, in the spectrum. And I know that would be like that's really anathema for a lot of people right now to be like, I'm not gonna take a side because that's the world we live in, it's like, take a side. Is this fuck or is this wow? Like, you know?
That you can't have both. It can only be one.
It can only be one, and it's like,
Right.
that's not true. It's never true. I mean, there's certain things that you can say, "This is unequivocally no," but they're actually very few.
Right. Well, even, as we look at, since we keep kind of going back to kind of what our government is going through right now, as you look at, some of these things that are revealed, okay, you get Elon Musk pulling out the chainsaw saying, I'm going to go after this stuff. Then you have people that are seeing that they may be going fuck from the standpoint of he's going to reveal
Mhm.
what I've been doing or not doing. Or, you might be seeing people saying, look at all this waste that we are it's
Right.
seeing in the government. And then you have other people are like, wow, we are accomplishing. I mean, there's so many different viewpoints of that are basically still multiple views of the fuck and the wow.
Right, right. And I think that if we can, hard as it is, allow ourselves to stay in that place,
Hmm.
right? That there's only the absolute is only in the absolute. In this relative world that we live in, there's all kinds of ways that things appear to different people, you know?
Yeah.
And that's where empathy and compassion come in too again, right? Like we said at the beginning, like part of the problem is we don't have any like we've lost empathy in this rush to pick a side, right? And if you pick a side, that means you can have no empathy for people on the other side, you know? Then I think if we can understand that there are so many different perspectives, there's so many different ways that we can experience and understand what's going on. And again, remember, we don't even have all the information. So, like, let's not even go down that rabbit hole. But, like, there's just so many different ways that we can respond to what's happening and allowing for the fact that your neighbor might see this entirely differently than you do. And instead of being like, well, I'm not going to talk to that person, being like, tell me, tell me how you see it because I could be wrong, you know?
Right.
Right. I could be wrong.
Yeah. It's just thinking, you think of like a color wheel
Mm,
that divides all the different shades and mixes of color. If you're standing there, and I don't know all the numbers that they use in computer, programming to identify a specific color because everything has a different number.
mhm,
But you may be standing there, you are 1305, and you're standing next to 1306, and you're a slightly different shade of orange,
mhm.
but you're saying, "You're wrong. I'm the correct color." And then the other person sitting next to you is just, again, another shade different than you, and you're saying, "No, you're wrong." And then you got somebody that's, way across the spectrum that's green, and you're saying, "Whoa, you're way wrong."
Right.
And that's the kind of the society we're in right now, where we have divided people, and it's like, nope, you're either orange or you're either red, green, or blue, right? Are those the three? No, red, yeah, red, green, and no, red, blue, and yellow
Right.
are the primary
Primary
colors. God,
colors. Yeah. Right.
yeah, and that's all you can be. You
Yeah.
can't be anything
I
else.
think we have purple. I think in this country there is purple,
Right,
but yeah, exactly. Like there's like that is a false. Those are false binaries or false divisions. They're equally as false as saying that fuck is only like it's bad and wow is only like it's good. It's
right,
I think if we can let go of this idea that there's only two, instead of realizing that this is a spectrum, this is it's that color wheel or it's
right.
that color palette. This is a spectrum, and and sure, sometimes you might be like, oh my gosh, like what is going on here? And other times you may be like, wow, this is fantastic. This is great. But those are just 2 points,
Yeah.
you know? Mm.
Who knew there'd be so much depth to two words?
Oh, there is so much depth to so many words, but those 2 in particular,
Yeah,
in our kind of, English slang for sure. But yeah, there's so much depth. I mean, we have all these words coming up right now, going back to
right,
the 10 words, they are all in play right now, all of them.
right.
And it still amazes me. This isn't tooting my horn at all. It's like, okay, I wrote these and I was pretty sure that I was onto something here, but the longer I see them play out, and the longer I see where, oh, this is balance. Here's where we really need to focus on collaboration. Celebration right now is a really hard one for people.
Yeah, we're so far from celebration right now. I mean, we're not even to cooperation. I'm not even sure we're at contemplation.
No,
So we go
no,
through those
we're
words.
stuck in acceptance.
Yeah, yeah.
We
Well, at
are
least,
really stuck in acceptance right now.
but at least we've hit attention. And I think, without attention, and whether the means to which that has been brought to our attention you agree with or disagree with, it does bring us to that next step. It brings us to a point where we have to accept
Mm-hmm.
that we're in a
Yeah.
right now if we don't do something. So
Right.
what do we do next?
Right. Exactly.
We
That's
have to be authentic. We have to say, okay, I've had this conversation. It's a continuing conversation with friends about the NIH funding and whether or not, they should be cutting the indirect costs. It's like, yeah, we do. And any university that is saying, no, I absolutely need 60% indirect costs, they need to be looking at, well, okay, be authentic. How are you using that money? You can't
Mhm.
just say, I need this amount of money without being able to document where it's going, how it's being spent. And if you can't do that, then you probably don't need it.
Right.
Or if you do need it, then why can't it go into the grant in the first place? And so, we have to all of us across the country, whatever issue we're dealing with, whatever chainsaw massacre we are currently involved in, we need to be authentic and say, okay, well, this is my hand in this,
Mhm.
and this is your hand in this.
And we
Which
also yeah, we also need to be able to be really honest with ourselves. Again, this comes back to, when you're being pushed on, right? You have to walk your talk.
Mhm.
You have to walk your talk. And so it's not enough to say, oh, here's my belief. If you're not doing it,
Right.
if you're not acting in honestly in relationship with that, that's part of authenticity is honesty, trust, trustworthiness, all of those things.
And then our authenticity leads to benevolence, right?
Exactly.
Where, your book is a solution to this problem. We need to send everybody in Washington a copy of 10 words
Uh, thank you.
because, yeah,
From your mouth to God's
right.
ears, right? Like, you and I might agree on this, but I do. I mean, I actually think if we explore these words, and if, since we're talking about fucking wow, like we explore our relationship to those words and to
Right.
those feelings and really, look at where we stand and how we can use these words and the principles behind the words, really. Because I mean, the words are just the symbol for the principle. How can we grow? Because this is one of those moments where we are being pushed on.
Right.
This is going to define how we respond, is going to define the next two generations, maybe?
At least, yeah.
I mean, depends, right? But it definitely is going to define the future in some way, shape, or form. So it's a pivotal moment, which doesn't mean we freak out and go running around going, the world's gonna end. It's that we go, okay, and if we look at um I mean, definitely biblical and in a lot of other spiritual texts, there are these moments, right, that are defining for the people in the story, right?
Right.
And they have to make a choice. They have to make a choice, and that choice oftentimes, is guided by whatever deity or or principle says, here's one way to go, and you have to decide which way you're gonna go.
Yeah, I mean, I keep going back to different religious perspectives or mythological, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. It all comes back to that making a choice, duality, good versus bad, fuck versus wow,
Mhm.
all of that kind of stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, it all is gonna always come back to that. I mean, we have the ability to make choices for better or for worse.
Yeah.
Right? But that is what separates us from, in some ways, from, other animals, even though we're still an animal, right?
Right.
And sometimes our animal brain takes over and we're not making choices. We're just
Right.
acting out of our limbic, responses, but that we have the capacity to make choices.
And I think that's where the concept of spirituality really lies in what separates us from, any other creature on earth is that we have that level of consciousness, that ability to make those kind of choices. We're not driven just by instinct.
Mhm.
We're not driven by, just whatever's programmed into our DNA. We have the capacity to consciously make choices that either benefit or harm someone else and harm ourselves.
Right. And it depends on what criteria you want to use to make your choices.
Right.
Right. So our argument, obviously, because we're on a spiritual podcast, is that rather than choosing, economic theory or political strategy, power, or military, whatever, like that those things aren't those aren't the frameworks that we're using to make choices, that we're using a spiritual framework
Right.
from which we make our choices.
And I would argue that, whether you are religious, not religious, atheist, Christian,
Yeah.
Buddhist, you know, insert religion, you are, even those economical, political decisions, all of those things basically come down to the spiritual, because it's either it's me or it's the whole, that there's something bigger than myself.
Right.
And I think part of where we are seeing the divisiveness in our society right now is because we are seeing much more of the me or the us, or the kind of tribal approach to things, as
Mhm.
opposed to, we are all part of a bigger thing and we're all in this together. And, there's something bigger than me. There's something bigger than my political party. There's something bigger than the corporation I work for, the company I work for, the institution I work for, or, the club that I belong to, or
Right.
whatever, whatever separates us into these little silos of individuals. There's something bigger than that.
Absolutely, and I think, that's really what's at stake here is, it's why we say we have a spiritual problem, right? That
Right.
ultimately it's not political, it's not economic, it's not environmental, it's not social. It is spiritual because unless and until we begin to see that bigger picture, right? And operate from that bigger picture, then we keep doing this and we will keep doing this.
Right. Even if we kind of right the course temporarily,
Unfortunately, if we look
yeah,
back through history and even our spiritual texts, it's the same idea, you go back to that. We talked about, did God know they were going to take the fruit? Oh yeah. God knew. God
yeah.
knew because this is our nature. It's really hard. This is why it's practice. We have to practice, right? It's really hard to stay in that place of this bigger picture, this understanding we're all interconnected. We need to do the win-win here. This is not a zero-sum game. It's really hard to stay in that non-dual understanding because our tendency is to go back into the dualistic. It's me or it's them. It's us or it's them. So it's always going to be that
Yeah.
push-pull, that challenge, between the two points on the spectrum.
And we
So
get
our
through.
well, I mean, the more we can move towards that understanding that, it's all one, or we're all in this together, and we need to figure out a way where it's not one wins and one loses, but when it's everybody wins, until we can really focus on that, we're gonna keep doing this little game.
Yeah. And then we'll get to that point where we kind of become a bit more unified. And then the next crisis emerges and it separates us and we go through it again. But it's all that growth process. It's that what I would call in exercise physiology, the overload principle, progressive overload. If we're growing spiritually
Mhm.
as human beings, we're going to be going through these cycles of greater and greater challenges that, the whole principle of overload is that in order for a body system to adapt, it has to be challenged to a level greater than that to which it is accustomed. And
Exactly.
so we're going to keep going through these issues where just the next thing comes
Right.
up.
Right. I mean, it's like, the great joke of if you think you're enlightened, go spend the weekend with your family.
I've never
Right?
heard that one before.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, yeah, oh yeah, you think you're enlightened? Here, challenge up, level up. Like it's always going to be that. You get to a one place and there will be another stressor, another challenge, another like, okay, now what are you going to do? That's the only way we grow, right? That's the only way we grow. It's the only way we evolve. It's the only way we adapt, whether we're talking spiritually or physiologically. We have to go through this. So, all right, so here we are. Woo, we got
Yeah.
front row seats. Like,
Yeah.
look, isn't this great? This is where I say, like, okay, on the one hand, you might be going, but on the other hand, it's, wow,
Yeah.
look at the opportunity we have.
Yeah.
Are we
And,
gonna take it?
if you think of like hiking up a mountain, and the more treacherous that trail is, you're like, oh, fuck, fuck. And then you get to the top and you get to see all the expanse in front of you. And it's like, wow. And
Right.
so that's the stress of life is that we are going through probably more moments of to get to that wow. And then, we get to wow. Suddenly
And then
that
it's
wow
not.
wanes a bit and then we're back to a and we got to keep progressing.
Well, yeah, you get up to the top of the mountain, you're like, "Oh, great view. Wow, this is amazing. Oh, man, I've got a 5-hour hike down."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Which is human nature. And then we're complaining again. It's like you just accomplished this great thing. You got to see this spectacular view, and immediately you're complaining about now I have to go back down the hill.
Exactly. Exactly.
Where's the gratitude?
How about thank you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where your thank you comes in. It's a moment we get to that. Well, even, I mean,
No,
whether
you
it's
can
at the
say
fuck or the
thank
wow.
you. You can the
Yeah.
thank yous in all of it, you
Yeah.
know? Thank you for the crisis that gives us the opportunity. Thank you for the push so that we can grow, you know? Thank you for the ability to make choices, you know? I
Gratitude costs.
Yeah, it's really important, and one of the things many, many years ago when I, early in my spiritual development and I was considering at that point going to seminary. And I was speaking to a friend of mine and I said, I kind of have a problem with this whole Messiah thing. Like not really able to deal with the Messiah thing very well. And she explained to me that she said, "Do you know those moments when like people make the right choices and people are good to one another, they're benevolent, they're caring, things are going really well. Like those are what we would call messianic moments. This is what we're striving for. Like the Messiah not being a person, but being a string of these moments. The more we can string those together,
Right.
like then that becomes like the messianic era. Like that's the goal here. The goal isn't necessarily, and sorry for any people who are, hardcore evangelical Christians, but it's not about a dude coming and saving us. It's about us making those choices to be more benevolent, to be more caring, more collaborative, more in balance with ourselves, with our environment, with each other. If we can do that, then you know what? We might save ourselves.
That's kind of my image when, a lot of, my Christian friends will dismiss other religions because they say that, the Bible says Christ is the way. And, I look at it as there are other ways that come to that same accomplishment, but what Christ had accomplished was to bring all that back together, what we've been talking about,
Yeah,
to kind of take the fuck and the wow and bring it together. I mean, you
right.
think of, the ultimate Christ story is that the fuck he's on a cross,
Right.
right? And
Right.
then it was still kind of bringing that to the wow.
Right. Right.
And so, our whatever our spiritual journey is, in a sense, it's all the same, bringing us back to that oneness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the evolution of man is to grow to that being fucking wow simultaneously,
Right. And
being one
being
again.
right. And being in that, you know, the awe and the wonder that we get that.
Mhm.
You know? I think about my own life and I think about some of the, really hard, fuck things that I've been through. And hard as it is, you distance helps, right? You can go back and you can say, wow, I'm really glad I actually had to go through that because it's made me a better person. And it made me a better person because I had to then make a choice.
And that kind of goes back to, a question I've often been asked. I ask people, and I might have asked it to you when we talked in the Aging Well podcast about, if you go back in time, what would you change?
Mm.
And maybe I didn't ask you that question, but my response has always been, well, I wouldn't say always, but as I've become more enlightened, my, my answer has become nothing, because if I go back and change any moment, I can go back to a fuck or a wow moment. If I change that, it's going to change the trajectory of not only my life, but everybody's life.
Yeah.
Because that one person, maybe I was impolite to somebody. And previous episode of this podcast, I had a friend of mine I went to high school and elementary school, Jay Bernhardt, who Jay has been deaf since a pretty young age. When I first knew him, I moved to the school district in the third grade. So that's when I first kind of met Jay. Jay had a hearing aid. And back then in the 70s, the hearing aid was like a box on his chest and with a wire up to his ear. Yeah. And kids would go up and it'd like yell into his chest. Of course, it would, pierce his ears. And, we just talked about, all the different ways that, people picked on him throughout the years. And I remember the first conversation we had after probably 40 some odd years, he was like, I'm trying to put, face to the name again. You weren't one of the people that used to pick on me in school. And I'm like, well, Jay, as a matter of fact, I was. But, and we just had this whole conversation about how, you grow from those relationships and the things that we do, how people are treating us, how we treat other people. And if you go back in time and you change any of that, yeah, I could have been a better person in that moment, but it's made me a better person now. It's made him a better person. Other people kind of associated with that, they've changed. So the moments in our lives that are good or the bad, we can't worry about those from the past standpoint. We have to, what am I doing with that experience right now in this moment? And I
Yeah.
have a choice that, from that experience, I can fuck or I can say, wow.
Hmm. Yeah.
And, a lot of us, it might be, wow, I've went through a lot of shit in my life, but look at where it's brought me.
Hmm.
Wow.
Hmm.
Or we could just keep sitting there, fuck,
Right.
I was mistreated and,
Right.
it's just like, this is all these problems that are on me are not my fault. It's because of this and
Yeah. Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And, we have a choice,
Right.
we have a choice of fuck or wow right now.
Always, always. And, followed shortly thereafter, either way, with thank you. Thank you for putting this in front of me so I have a choice. Thank
Yeah.
you for, showing me where my limits are so that I can explore those and expand those, always. And, you know, I agree. I wish that in our halls of power around the world right now, that people, those who are wielding the power, would take a moment to move out of that extreme duality and come back to the idea that we're all in this together, and this isn't just one group benefiting and another group losing. Finding a way to put the fuck and the wow together for themselves, for all of us.
And maybe we need to be wearing Maha hats that make America. Well, no,
No, it
that's
could
not what I
still
want to
be
say.
MAGA. How about make America grateful again?
That would be a good one, yeah. But I was just thinking, make humanity. So it should be H8. I don't know how to do it, but yeah, just make humanity great again. And
Yeah.
just think of or just make humanity great
Yeah, because I'm not
or
sure
make
we've
humanity
ever got,
grateful.
I mean,
Yeah,
we've had those moments, right? We've
right,
had those moments. We definitely have. And unfortunately, sometimes it just takes a crisis
right,
for us to behave like decent human beings. And then as soon as it's over, we just go back to being, being ourselves.
right.
So it's that's why I will say that in regardless, we may not agree with the methodology of the way things are happening right now. But we can be grateful for the fact that it's one of those crises that's going to give us the opportunity to make the choices, to come together, to work together, to make the world and ourselves a better place. It's that
Yeah.
opportunity, and that's usually when we show up.
I always teach my students that, I use this theme opportunity costs, that everything presents an opportunity. And when we take an opportunity, like from the standpoint of exercise,
Mhm.
for me to exercise, yeah, having this podcast this morning, we're recording this at 6 a.m. I had to sacrifice working out this morning, but I know I can work out later in the day. But it's like there was a cop there. I have an opportunity to have this great conversation with
Mhm.
you, or I could say, well, I can't schedule you at 6 o'clock because I got to work out. There's a cost involved there, but what is the overall benefit that comes from that? And so every choice that we make has some outcome.
Mhm.
and that outcome, it could benefit us or it could not. But in the long run, if we're making all the right choices that we're talking about here, then the decision that I make benefits everybody. And that's the goal that we should be approaching.
Mhm. Hopefully, yeah. Yeah, and to the best of our ability to foresee down the line, right?
Right.
Because time is long. But this is why it's again, we can go into a theological deep dive here, but you know, there are two versions of the golden rule. One is do unto others, right? And the other is don't do unto others that which is hateful to you. Because it's easier to think about if this is going to harm me, then, you know, it could very well harm somebody else. So I'm not going to do that. So sometimes the benefit is like, just don't want to cause any more harm.
Imagine a world if we actually approached every situation that way, rather than what's benefiting me.
Mhm.
And then you kind of, well, if it benefits me, then it's good that it benefits everybody else,
Right.
rather than what harm am I doing to somebody else in doing this situation?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really, I mean, they're not actually the same thing, but it's about the relationship of our choices
Right.
to others, and that goes back to what you said. Like if we see that it's not just our little narrow lives and world, but that, that bigger picture, then we make choices in relationship to that bigger picture.
Yeah, so the good and the harm is again the fuck and the wow, the yin and the yang, the good and the bad,
Right. And these are not
duality.
easy choices. It's not easy. Nobody
Right.
nobody said this was gonna be easy.
Right.
That was in the fine print that you didn't see.
Yeah. It was in that agreement that you sign on the internet where you just click the box.
Right, right. Oh, by the way,
Yeah.
here's what you're gonna go through. It's gonna be hard. It's hard.
Uh,
And it's fuck and it's wow. And it's thank you. Thank you. I'll take it. Even if it's hard, I will take it over not having it. You know?
yeah. So, what are some steps that we can take today, anybody, the listeners and viewers, that can help them to just wow the fuck out of today and take the steps and make the changes that we've been talking about in this episode today?
I think one of the things is to remember that yes, we live in a dualistic world, but it's not black and white, right? It's not black and white. And to give ourselves permission to see the variety of ways that we can use those words and to recognize that things are not fixed, it's not static, it things are moving. And right now they're moving really fast, right? So we have to stay nimble. We have to stay flexible. If we get rigid, in strong winds, we're going to break.
Right.
So it's being flexible, um, and remembering to take the time to say thank you. Recognize that this is an opportunity for you to grow, for us to grow. This is, the crisis that is the opportunity. And thank you for that. Man, we got front row seats. Isn't it awesome? you know, VIP tickets. Great.
Front row seats to the shit show.
Yes. Yeah, because it's the opportunity for us to define what matters to us, and to act on that, to walk our talk, to build the better world that we want to live in, you know. If we're not pushed, we're not going to grow. We're not going to move. So we're being pushed.
We're being pushed into the situation where the next word was benevolence, and then we
Right.
got to shift into balance. And
Mhm.
balance is going to require some kind of fulcrum in there, which is the contemplation, and start to be thinking about what can we do to cooperate and to make balanced choices that allow for the success of all people.
Exactly, which takes us into collaboration, and then we can celebrate. Look at what we can do, Look at the people we've become and the world that we're building, by caring for one another, caring for our environment, doing the best we can. Nobody said we weren't going to get the fucks.
Right.
Nobody said that.
When
So,
was the last time this country celebrated in that way? Where just we all kind of came together.
well, yeah, I don't know that it might have been like the end of World War II, when there was at least a consensus on, the end of that war and the defeat of the Nazis was something worth celebrating. Uh Again, there was probably more people that agree, there's more of a consensus. I don't, I don't know that there's been a time since then.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of that. I know if you kind of read the book, The Turning, or not yeah, is it The Turning? Yeah, I think it's The Turning. The fourth Turning is a book.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it talks about those different cycles of time and how we're really right now in one of those crises. But I'm trying to think. I think that last generation of crises was World War II.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean,
Yes.
I was just thinking another time might have been the moon landing.
Hmm.
Where I think that that was one of those wow moments, those real wow moments, that there would have been a very large majority of people, I do know people who are like, "We never went to the moon."
I know
That
people
was
like that too.
that was all, that was done in a
Yeah,
soundstage somewhere, but I would say the vast majority of the people, were like, "This is amazing. Wow. Look at what we've been able to do." And
yeah,
again, like, let's just put this in context. If we didn't have the Cold War space race, we wouldn't have done that.
right.
So, you have to have something pushing on you. And here we are, we're getting pushed. Yes.
Yeah,
You know?
celebrate that.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
celebrate the fact, I know it's a stretch for a lot of people, but that's the like be celebrating the opportunity to grow, to make different choices. Mm.
That might be that point we have to just kind of wrap the podcast because remember, I can't just give a closing to this. It's just kind of wind it down with word of wisdom, and I think that's where we're at. So
Mm.
I thank you for the conversation today. I know we could keep talking, and that just means we're gonna have to have you back on the podcast,
Mm.
shortly down the road again.
Mm.
Maybe we come back and revisit fucking WoW in another month or so after some of the dust settles in the world and just kind of see where we're at. And maybe we track this whole progress of, this
Yeah.
major spiritual problem. I think that really what has initiated this podcast in the first place. And, I think we're having great conversation. I'm hoping that people are hearing this and as people are watching this, that, maybe I always hear like the NPR driveway moments, if you listen to NPR, that people are just having these moments. They listen to this podcast as they're driving into work and then they go into work and they just behave differently to their coworkers and to their clients and customers and have those
Yeah.
conversations,
Yeah.
rather than, it's us and them. It's like, well, okay, we're on different sides here. How do we come together? How do we bring the fucking wow together and make something positive from it?
Well said, Jeff. And as always, a pleasure. I love these conversations. They get me thinking too, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do have hope that maybe if we can remember that this is an opportunity to make the choices that we want to make to build a better world for ourselves, our families, our loved ones, and others all together. This is our chance. This is our chance. And you know,
Yeah.
it's gonna take work. And are we up for it?
I just encourage the listeners and the viewers to just go out and wow the fuck out of today.
I love that you've managed to find a way to put them together. It's great.
There's so many ways you could
Oh
put
yeah.
them together. So
Well, thank you. Thank
you're
you.
welcome. You have a great rest of the day.
You too.